Hello and welcome to Maker Things, the upside down of making, with me, Samantha. It is so awesome to have you guys here today for this session about makerspaces and makerspace theory. A little bit about me before we get started. My name is Samantha Ducher. I am an instructional technology coordinator for a little-ish district outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Part of my job has been being the administrator for our district's library media specialists. I've been very, very fortunate to work with our amazing, amazing, amazing library media specialists for about 3 years now. And in that time, I have learned a ton from them. And I have also gone out, and this has sort of become my passion. So in conferences, in my doctorate program, it's become the topic of my dissertation, sort of in everything. This has become such an important thing to me. So what you're here for today is really in my heart, and it's an important thing for me. You can find me on all the things at Tech for Y'all, so TechForYall. I know there's a toolbar down there, so you can't see all the stuff, but I have Tech for Y'all is my Twitter handle, so please connect with me on there. Techforyall.org is my website. I'll upload this presentation on there after this as well, so if you want to access it there, you can. And I also have a Gmail, techforyall@gmail, and I am always here to help. So I understand that sometimes when you go to these conferences, you see these really, really exciting things, and it might be 6 months before you get to actually do some of those exciting things. If you need my help in 6 months, 6 years, 6 days, I'm here. You can always email me at techforyall@gmail.com or connect with me on Twitter. I'll put my Twitter handle down in the description of this video as well. Just know I'm here to help. Additionally, this video is asynchronous, so that gives you the power of pause. I'm going to give you a lot in 30 minutes. Just know that this is going to be a fast and furious type of session. There's going to be a lot of stuff thrown at you in this 30 minutes, okay? Please remember you have the power of pause, okay? Pause, stop, think about it, look at the slides, step back, take some time to discuss it with somebody, and then come back if you need to. Just know I'm not going to take the video down from YouTube. You can access it at any time. Okay? It is there for you whenever you need it. Also know you can contact me at any time, right? Additionally, at the end of this presentation, a couple things are going to happen. Number one, I'm going to give you the link to a Google form. If you fill out that Google form, I'll directly send you a copy of the slides and a copy of the tool that I talk about in this presentation. Okay. I'm all about sharing. So if you want that stuff, you can fill out that Google form and you can get access to it. Number two, this is asynchronous, right? So you miss out on some of that discussion piece, okay? Because I'm not here with you live. So I'm going to give you a link to a Padlet. Okay, that'll also be in the description at the bottom of the video on YouTube. That Padlet is going to let you sort of create a community. You can ask me questions and I'll be monitoring it. You can ask each other questions. You can share awesome things you've done. And you can ask questions of each other. The thing that I have really noticed is that so often makers are isolated in their own school environments because there's just one person usually who's doing a makerspace, and it might be one person in the district, it might be one person in the school, but there's never as much community as we wish there was. So please use that Padlet to create community and make connections with people. Make connections with people because that's how you learn all of this cool maker stuff. So much of this maker stuff is what I call generational knowledge. A lot of it has not been written down, which is why I wanted to write it down in my dissertation. There are just these wise people out in the world who hold so much knowledge about making. And so I really wanted to put that in my dissertation down on paper. And that's what I've endeavored to do with the tool that we're going to talk about today. Okay. But more than anything, I want you guys to communicate with each other. So just know there's going to be a lot coming at you in the next half an hour. But in the end, you're going to have a way to communicate with each other and create community. And if you fill out that form, I'll also send you all of my resources so you have them. Okay. So once again, I'm Samantha Ducher. After this, find me, connect with me on all the things and all the places at Tech for Y'all. Okay. So So agenda. As I was discussing before, I'm currently in the last year of my doctorate program through Morehead State in Kentucky. It's an instructional technology doctorate program. So I am working on this all day, every day. So it is a continuing journey and it continually evolves. So connect with me on all those social medias that I've pointed out to see how it goes. But what I have been endeavoring to do is create a lesson planning guide for teachers. I've done a lot of consulting across the US. I've worked in California, Kentucky, and Arkansas in different school districts, and I've encountered makerspaces in all of those settings. What I find is that so often we get really excited at conferences. Maybe your administrator gets really excited, or a library media specialist gets really excited, and all this really cool stuff gets bought. So you buy all this really cool stuff, and then there's usually just one teacher who either has the time or the space in their schedule or the physical space to do a makerspace. And so that one teacher gets all the stuff. And then it's like, hey, please go ahead and figure out how to use all of this stuff on top of your already busy job in your already busy day, and just figure it out. And because of that, so often makerspaces don't actually get realized to their fullest potential just because of time and because the training hasn't been provided. I am a big believer that makerspaces can always be really rigorous, content-based, and can have things come out of them that you actually can assess and can hold in your hands, and it can document student learning. Okay. I think products are really important for that because you have to have something to document the learning that's going on, especially when it comes to just advocating for your makerspace. So I think that as we go through, think that all of these steps that we're going to go through, they're going to be idealized and put together in a document that you can access if you fill out that form later. So I'm going to go through 8 steps, which will be in a document that you can access later, and they sort of make up this lesson planning guide that I am still working on. Okay. And then we'll do the community piece, and I'll also give you the resources because all of this has been sourced by me from all of those different wise sages in the makerspace community, and I'll discuss and point you in the direction of them. Okay. But the ultimate goal of this is to walk you through the different steps that become the learning guide, the lesson planning guide. That you could give to a teacher who is low on time, a teacher who was low on training and you don't have time to train them, or you don't have time to send them off somewhere to train them, and really help push their makerspace sort of to the next level, right? So let's go ahead and get started. So step 1, this is a really important thing to consider when you are planning a makerspace lesson. These are the learning dimensions of making. I was talking about all those different great people who come up with things in the maker community. This is the brainchild of the Tinkering Studio in the Exploratorium in California. They have done a ton of work on making and made a ton of incredible books. So seek them out. The links and everything are in the end of this presentation if you're looking for anything more about learning dimensions of making. But this is sort of the lens that you're going to view the lesson through. So before you actually start working on designing the lesson, you have to decide what learning dimension you're going to target with your students. So are they going to work on initiative and intentionality, problem solving and critical thinking, conceptual understanding, creativity and social or self-expression, or social and emotional engagement? Okay, that's the lens that you're going to look through as you go through the different planning processes from here. So you're thinking about how you can target these things with your lesson activities. Step 2, you are going to choose an approach to guide your planning. This came from some approaches that are used by the Maker Educator Collective, which they're a big collective across the United States, and this is sort of their brainchild. This really locked into place for me how you could make a makerspace really rigorous and just incredibly content connected and curriculum based. So think about it like there's 4 different dimensions four different approaches to planning. Are students going to be tinkering to discover? Are they going to be making to learn a new concept? Are they going to be applying a concept they learned in the classroom, so an application project? Or are they going to be working on something that has a community impact? Think of those as a continuum, right? If we are thinking of them as a continuum and in complexity, they grow. So tinkering to discover is like your DOK level 1. That's your base level. And that is where a lot of makerspaces get stuck. That's like, hey, I need to introduce you to this really cool tool. Here's some new terms. Here's a little bit of base coding knowledge. Like maybe we're using Spiros for the first time, and you just give it to the kids to play with. Okay, that's tinkering to discover. That's a really important part of your makerspace lessons, but you don't want to live there. You don't want to get stuck there because that is kind of your DOK level 1 base level project in a makerspace. Making to learn is sort of your next level up. That's as we're increasing in complexity. An application project is really cool. That's your next level because then you're taking stuff from the classroom and connecting it directly. Like, oh, you just learned about angles in the classroom? Well, here, come to the makerspace and we're going to do a project that applies the concept you just learned. Your next and last one is community impact. This is going to be your most complex, and this is also going to be your most long-term. So if you're working on sort of long-term project management with your students, this is a really great way to do it. Community impact can often be connected with Genius Hour projects that might happen in a makerspace because you can sort of dovetail those together really well. But this is going to be your biggest and most complex way to have students work on a project. Okay? You could have students connecting to something they learned in health class and maybe organizing an event or creating something which could benefit someone else that they might display. Many different options, but that really focuses on that user empathy piece in design thinking. And your design thinking theories should always sort of be grounding what you're doing in the makerspace with students. Design thinking, also called the engineering design process in some schools. So as we talk through these are picture examples, okay? So it gives you a little bit of a visual. Tinkering to discover, we talked about how that's your first level. This was a project where students were tinkering to discover with switches and batteries. Okay, we gave the students the materials and then we gave them no background and we let them just tinker and play for about a half an hour. And then we came back together and we discussed what we had learned. But this is just tinkering and playing. Batteries, switches, connectors. What can they make happen? How can they play with it? And what can they learn just from the tactile use of the thing for the first time? This is a Making to Learn project. This was a project I did at the Maker Educator Collective event that they do. They do it every summer through Emphasis. It's really great. I would consider checking it out if you have anyone that you want to send to learn more about making. This was a language arts project where we read through a different piece of text, and then we all made quilt squares that represented what our text was about. And then we all connected those quilt squares thematically and shared out about our text as well. And we sort of made a quilt, and it all sort of became clear at the end because we were all given different pieces of the same speech. And so those all became a quilt. We shared out, we represented them and organized them thematically. Okay. So that's how we would be applying and making to learn, right? We're applying those concepts we've been using all year. And we're now making to learn about this speech. It was a speech during the civil rights era. And we're going to learn more, kind of like a jigsaw, but on a much bigger making scale, right? I may have read one paragraph, but I made a quilt square about it. I shared out about it, and then I got to hear and see everybody else's. And I got to do that higher level thinking of thematically organizing them as well. An application project. This was a math application project, and it was about linkages from a mathematics perspective. On the top, that was a science application project about balance. So there was a counterweight in that little toilet paper roll creature. Community impact. This is students working on a community impact project together. So they all this was one of my 6th grade classes. We went through the Genius Hour Bad Idea Factory, which is a really great activity to go through with kids. And they narrowed down on 5 or 6 different things in this moment that they thought that the community needed assistance with. So this was all about user empathy. And this was just the first day of a semester-long community impact maker project we worked on together. Step 3 is setting your concrete learning goals and your content connections. Okay, this sounds really simple. Well, Sam, when we plan lessons, we always set concrete learning goals and can make content connections. But the thing is that so often this doesn't actually get done in makerspaces. So your learning goals might look different. Okay, your learning goals might be something where the product is a 3D printed thing, or any number of things. What you see here is we actually used a software to scan the actual shapes that we made, and then the software turned them into 3D shapes, and we worked on converting those into something that could be 3D printed. Okay. But your content connections is important as well. From an administrative perspective, if you can give your makerspace teacher, or sometimes it's a paraprofessional, or sometimes it's a teacher who teaches other things but also is in the makerspace, if you can give them time and have some sort of accountability where it is built into planning in other PLCs, then you really unlock the door to makerspaces, and to makerspaces that are really rigorous and content connected. We've worked on having our makerspace teachers plan in different PLCs. So maybe in the first semester they plan with social studies and math, and then in the second semester they plan with science and language arts, but we've tried to incorporate them into our PLCs, because what happens is as they sit back and just see the normal PLC happen, they can say, well, if you come and work with me, we could do this project and connect it to your classroom. And that's all around better because our kids are engaging in this design thinking process, engineering design process, whatever you want to call it, in the makerspace. But it's just like everything else. If we can't connect that to stuff happening outside of that classroom, so in other classes and in the community, then that learning isn't really salient or important. So you just want to connect it to as many of the other important things that they're doing, because the worst thing that you can do with a makerspace is trivialize it. If it's just the fun place to go play with things, then teachers don't really feel like it's important, and neither do students. So you want to make sure that you're making it as salient and important as possible, and the best way to do that is have connections to all the different contents that students may encounter. Step 4. Another thing that is often neglected in makerspaces, you need to always decide how the students will be grouped. So how are students going to be grouped in that project? When students are tinkering to discover, a bigger group is usually good because they can have that discourse and discussion. I just tried this. I connected this battery to this circuit and nothing happened. What did you do there? And they can also pay attention to what other students are doing. So your more hesitant students, your students who might not be ready to jump in all the time, are going to see other students in a big group and be able to sort of get sparked and excited about that and get into it. In bigger projects, like in an application project or in a community project, you might want to think about grouping them smaller. And you also might want to think about grouping them by themes. Like if you've had kids who have been working on projects in their class, like we know with, I've worked with students in language arts who were doing different essay topics. I grouped them thematically by those essay topics for the application project we were going to do in the makerspace. And then that started a really good discussion in those groups about what they were doing. Additionally, another thing that is so often forgotten is how are students going to document throughout their experience? A big mistake that's often made in makerspaces is we don't have them document anything. We're just like, come on in and tinker. They need to be documenting even when they're tinkering. This is a photo of we had a documentation cup in the center of the table while students were tinkering. And so they'd be tinkering, and there was a documentation cup, and it had about 50 of these little paper slips in it, and they all had different questions. Okay? Every 7 minutes, I would stop all the students. They'd stop tinkering, and then I'd have them document in their documentation composition book. And so they would just pull one out of the jar. They all have different questions, and they would answer it in their documentation book. Okay. You'll see in the picture it says record one change or turn of direction you've taken since the beginning. So that was just the beginning of tinkering. But it's so important to have students make sure, just like we do in the classroom, we need to have them engaging in reflection, right? I may be playing and I may be tinkering for the first time, but I still need to be reflecting on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, because it really helps with that metacognition. Step 5. What facilitation moves are you going to make? Okay. This is an important one. How are you going to have discourse with your students in that room? How are you going to move about? One of the biggest make or break things that you can do movement-wise is you really need to be cognizant about checking in on all of your groups. That is just a mistake that happens as teachers, right? You end up in one corner and you're in that corner more often. But especially when you're doing making projects, it's all about the community in the room. And you need to make sure you're checking on everybody, right? So you want to make sure you're moving around the room equitably. But you also need to think about your discourse. When you're tinkering, when students are in a tinkering lesson, open-ended questions are the way to go, because you want them to learn and make conclusions. So here's the thing, they're going to say silly stuff, and that's fine. If they're tinkering, I would urge you to not correct anyone. Let them have their discourse and their play and learn by making mistakes in that tinkering environment, because you can really hamper their fun and their want to tinker and play and learn that way if we're like, oh no, well that's not right, honey. You should do it this way, or this is the right definition of that. Let them play. Don't be afraid to ask them questions and write their answers up on a board somewhere concrete in the room, and come back to those like the next week when you do a continuation of that lesson, and they might have applied something and be able to say why that was wrong. Once again, it's coming back and continuing this project and coming back to the same concepts that we make sure to incorporate, like reflection, in the actual classroom we need in the makerspace. Because we trivialize a makerspace when we don't have that documentation, we don't have that reflection. When it comes to monitoring, you also need to think about monitoring students safety-wise. Depending on what kind of makerspace lesson you might be doing, there might be equipment involved, there might be scissors. So you want to think about how your space is physically laid out as well. Okay? Always have that safety hat on too when you're conceptualizing a makerspace lesson. This was a really cool facilitation technique that we did with those quilt squares I referenced earlier. Once we found out and all came to the conclusion that we had a different paragraph from the same speech, she had us try to order them from the beginning of the speech to the end together as a group. And so she sat back and just let us try to order them on our own, and then came in at the end and she would point and ask questions. So she was very deliberate, our instructor was, about the questions she was asking and about how she monitored us and when she did not monitor us, and just let us come to our own conclusions and have our own discussions. Step 6. This one is a little bit simpler, but you have to know what media, so what form of making are you going to be doing? What's going to be in kiddos' hands? And how are you going to integrate that into the lesson? The picture that you see there, that's a linkage. So there's a linkage in there, and when you move that bottom link, it moves the wand hand. Okay, so you could call that a linkage. You could have them making paper mechatronics, so some sort of paper combination of things that is going to move and work with each other. You can have them doing quilt squares. What kind of media, right? And this is a really big fun part of the lesson planning, because it's so open and you can have so many different cool, awesome medias that you use. I know that for us in our community, we ask for donations in our makerspaces, and the biggest donation that we get is toilet paper rolls and paper towel rolls. And so a lot of our media is, what can we do today with toilet paper and paper towel rolls? There's nothing that says that you can't find a million ways to use those. But just thinking about that. Step 7, we're getting there, aren't we? This is just a picture that I have here of evidence in making. Before we get to the next step, think about everything we've talked about and how I've been hitting home again and again how important it is to make the makerspace like a classroom. So including that documentation and including that reflection. So you want to have evidence in the room. The big thing about the evidence that you collect or the products that you collect of student learning and the process that they're going through in the room is that in making it really needs to be visible and tangible, and it needs to be varied. If you have a space that allows it, having a big board or a wall where you can put things up and leave them until students come back and build upon what they did last time, that can really break barriers for the makerspace, especially because a lot of our makerspaces students are only interacting with once every week or so. So for example, in this picture that you see here, students were engaging in a make and they were answering questions about reflecting on those big pieces of paper. And so those were stuck up all over the board and the wall. And then when students would come in the next week, they could immediately identify their handwriting and their hypotheses that they were going through just by seeing it on the wall. It's that tangible piece. So your evidence needs to reflect what's going on in the space, right? In the space, we are making things. And so you want your evidence to be tangible as well. Step 7, this one is, how do I need to prep? Do I need to find 1,700 toilet paper rolls from the community? Do I need to make sure I have something in my budget to buy string and beads and buttons for this make? There is always that budgetary thing to think of as well. But I will say communities will donate stuff. We are a 100% Title I school district, and we get a ton of stuff donated. All you got to do is reach out and ask for it. And when your kids love the makerspace especially, you're going to get more and more stuff. Step 8, this is your last step. Where does this fit into the progression of the unit of learning? So if you are planning with a PLC, so if I'm planning with a PLC on a regular basis, where can I, if I'm looking like thematically at their units or their map of the semester, where can I pinpoint a place and say, you know what, we could do an incredible community impact project here that's going to relate exactly to what you're talking about and fit into your progression of learning. The biggest thing here is, remember, I keep saying it over and over again, and I know it's annoying. You want to make sure that a makerspace is embedded in the way that you plan for other lessons and other subjects. So if in other subjects we're making sure that this project, this final paper in language arts fits into the lesson in the right place, you need to be cognizant of where the make fits into the progression of the unit as well. So if you're working with other teachers in those PLCs, it's going to be a really great way for you to target great moments where they could come into the makerspace. I know that some different materials, like we use Benchmark in our district, and Benchmark has like a thematic map for the year that's K-5. And so using that thematic map, we can really work with our library media specialists to think of when to do certain makes, make them more salient and more important if they relate to the themes of the time. So I know this was fast and furious, but remember, I told you I'm going to give you as many resources as possible. So first of all, and all these links will be in the description of the video as well, okay? So don't feel like you have to write them down. If you go to bit.ly/makergroup, so that's all lowercase, it's just a short bit.ly for you. And if you're in the slides, you can click on that AGO as well, and it'll take you there. But if you go to bit.ly/makergroup, that will pop you into the form that I talked to you about. Simple form. All I need is your email address. You hit submit. This is if you want me to email you the materials from today. So I'll email you the slides. I will email you the actual lesson guide, which is going to walk you through in a way that you could fill out, sort of like a lesson planning document, those 8 steps. Okay. So if you want to join this community and be in here with us, bit.ly/makergroup. And if you see, you click on the link, it'll take you there as well. Next slide. These are my resources. So I said that I had to give all of these incredible people that I learned these things from a big shout out. So on this page, you're going to have access to our Maker Padlet. If you click on this will take you to the Padlet as well. Padlets are really great for community discussion. This one is open for everybody. You have 3 columns. Share some things that you've done. Like that would be awesome. If you're working in Makerspaces, share some stuff you've done with us. You can upload when you click on this plus button. You can make a comment, give it a title. You can add links to things students have created. You can add pictures, videos, anything you want. Okay. So you can ask questions for me or for the community. And then this is community discussion, right? So this one I'm going to stay out of. This one is for you to engage with other people who attended this session with you at the conference, okay? I encourage you to jump on this Padlet and engage with people. The maker community is amazing because it really is just built by other makers. So it's all about being positive and excited and sharing what you know. On this page, you're going to find links to the Pathfinder Summer Institute. They have a wonderful Maker Educator Collective week-long course. Okay, the Maker Educator Collective's website, the Tinkering Studio, which is where you get those dimensions and what you want to target, and then Maker Ed also has incredible ready-to-use lessons and units that you can access. All of those are links and easy for you to access at any time. Those websites are awesome. They're going to have blog posts almost weekly as well that give you other lesson ideas for your makerspace. And last but not least, please stay in touch with me. I'm at Tech for Y'all on all the things, and it was absolutely wonderful to have you here with me today. Once again, Tech for Y'all on all the things. I'm Samantha Dushare. It was awesome. Thank you guys so much.